it's difficult to impossible to be objective about some things. And that's where the real challenges are. We heard a lot about practical wisdom. And that's a high-level aspiration, the idea that you want to be practically successful in the world. And obviously that takes a great deal of knowledge. You get it right, you can be successful. You get it wrong, you will fail. But knowledge often doesn't take you the whole way, because we have this elevated concept of wisdom, that in some sense you have knowledge, but you have it in a bigger intellectual framework, a value framework, a skill framework. You know how to make it happen, a practically wise person. We heard also about rationality. We heard about statistics and models and scientific predictions and so forth. And all of this is in the cognitive realm. Most of you, I understand, are going into the business world, and that's an important application. One of the things we most know, this comes out of Professor Salzman's talk yesterday, is what goes on inside your head. Your capit, from which we get capitalism, is the most important asset. This is a knowledge economy. The days of 99% of us doing physical labor in which there's a minimal amount of thinking and wearing out our bodies in order to scrape a living, what we have is an economy in which huge amounts of knowledge are operationalized, and it's the people who have the knowledge and they know what to do with it, and they have the new knowledge and they know how to act on it quickly and successfully. Those are the people who make it in the world. Knowledge absolutely fundamental. So the human mind that can acquire and integrate and apply all of this, it's an amazing, amazing phenomenon. Now, one way of getting to how amazing the human mind is and why it's so important to us is if you think about kids. Take a baby, fresh from the womb, just out, and for humans, a human baby, how long it takes until that baby becomes an adult who's able to function independently in the real world. And humans are really outliers on all of this. Over breakfast, I was noticing a young robin bird. Those are the ones with the red breast. And basically the robin, from the time it is laid as an egg in the nest until it is out and flying around and knows how to get its own food and so forth, 1 month. From egg to functioning robin, able to do what it needs in order to survive. And it has to build itself up over the summer so that it can do the migration, right, and so forth. Now we think of dogs, maybe cats. It's a longer process. They are born, but basically within 6-8 months or so, they become full grown and they've acquired basically all of the knowledge they need in order to function as a dog or a cat in the world. Dolphins, pretty smart, right, for a species, but from birth to 5 years, maybe 6 years, it's longer. And then it's an adult dolphin and it knows and has all of the skills to function as an adult dolphin. Chimpanzees, also pretty smart, 6 to 8 years or so. Now, consider a human 6 to 8 year old. If we were to take any human 6 to 8 year old and say, okay, you're on your own, right? Go for it. No, it would be a disaster. They would not make it. To the point where, as our society is becoming more and more complicated, here some of you still are, right, in your 20s, acquiring the skills, the knowledge, the practical wisdom, and we have to start to talk about things about lifelong learning, that this is absolutely fundamental to who we are as a human being. Now, to start getting analytical on this, as we talk about the human cognitive process that we go through in order to acquire knowledge. And we take an infant. Where should I start here? Okay, I'm going to start here. First thing that happens is baby's born. Actually, there's some indication that prior to birth, the sensory apparatus is starting to respond to signals from outside. It can sense pressures, maybe hear some sounds, and so forth. But child comes out and is immediately bombarded by all sorts of sensory information. And we know what it's like, even as adults, when we go into a new situation, we just plunge you into a situation, it's overwhelming, and you take a moment to try to figure out what's going on in the world. Just to take an example, take a car, we pop the hood on the trunk, and you look, and I make you look at it. Initially, it's just a whole bunch of sensors, but then you start to very quickly, and children start to do it, to start to notice discrete objects that more or less hang together. Right? This part is this shape, and it's this color. This part is this shape, and it's this color, and so forth. And we say, at that point, we start to perceive, or we'll call it this perception. And this is not only visual perception. We've all had the experience, even if we're sophisticated music listeners, if I start playing a piece of music, but it's in the middle of the song, right, initially it just kind of sounds like noise. Right? And so all of the senses are happening there. You are hearing all of the sounds that are being played, but it takes a moment for you to start seeing what sounds go with what sounds, and you get some suggestion of what the melody is or what is going on. And so you have performed a kind of integration. Now this happens right from birth, perhaps a little bit before, and we become increasingly sophisticated at using our senses and perceiving and picking out objects in the world. And there's object persistence, so the baby, for example, very quickly is able to pick out his mother or her mother from the background and see the mother as a kind of a perceptual unit. And then if the mother starts to move through the baby's visual field, initially it's kind of jerky, but then the baby very quickly learns how to track and see that the mother was over here, and there's object permanence. It's still my mom. She's not I'm putting words in the baby's mouth, but it's still mom, and I see her as the same entity now over here, and increasingly sophisticated things happen there. Now, kids vary, but then at a certain point, sometimes 6, 7, 8, 9 months, kids start to use words to pick out particular things in the environment. And here there's a conceptualization move, and as far as we can tell, humans start to be distinctive at this point here. So often there's a friendly competition between the mother and the father for what the kid's first word is going to be. Will it be mama? Or will it be dada, right? And so they're encouraging the kid, right, to pick out me and to assign the word dada, right, or mama. And my understanding is that the dads, if they're involved in the process, win more often than the women do. And the hypothesis is that saying dada is a little bit easier than saying mama, right? So there's more male superiority, at least in that particular respect. And this process also starts to happen with rapid fire. The kid starts then to acquire lots and lots of words and to know how to use them, and the parents are often working very closely with the kid to fine-tune the words. So I remember one of mine, when she was little, we had dogs, and so pretty quickly she learned the word doggy, right? Doggy, doggy, doggy. So, oh, right, wow, this is great. And it really is amazing. I don't know if you've had kids yet, but you will love the cognitive development process of kids when they come along. So doggy, oh, she knows doggy. But then we were driving out, and in the truck, she's in the back seat, and we go past a field where there's some horses out there. And she goes, doggy, doggy, doggy. And of course, as a good dad, we said, no, horsey, 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 right? And the same thing happened a little bit later with cow, right? So the cows were doggy. So the distinction between cows and dogs and horses and cats and all of this is things that we learn, but we learn it in fairly increasingly sophisticated fashion. Now, human then are more even amazing than that, because when we start putting concepts and words together into complete sentences. So I will say, would you get your blanket from your room? Well, that's you, blanket, room, get. That's a whole bunch of concepts. And at some point, the kid can understand that integration of all of those words, and will learn to go into the room and do the performance, come out with the blanket. And then we start talking in sentences, and of course, parents are very proud when that starts to happen. At some point, we start to tell the kids stories, where we take a whole bunch of sentences and we put the sentences together into a larger unit, And typically these are pretty short narratives, right? So we might have, I don't know, there's a chicken living on the farm, and the chicken has a friend that's a duck, and they have various kinds of adventures, right? And they're scared by the big fox that's out there, and so they run away, and the farmer saves them. And so that might be 20 or 30 or 40 sentences all put together, but the kid at a certain point can handle all of it and sees, oh, this is a beginning, middle, and end, and they like it. And then you have very short stories, and then as the kids get older, they start reading books that have chapters in them, right? Where it's the whole integration of this, and then all of this, and all of this. So we have increasingly sophisticated narratives that and this is of course open-ended until hopefully by the time we're teenagers, we can read multi-100-page novels and stories, and we can pay attention to a movie that lasts for a couple of hours and see the thing as a whole. And then often this is fictional, but we do a similar thing in the non-fiction area. We start to understand theories, which are usually big, complicated integrations of lots and lots of sentences describing particular facts in the world and how they're all related to each other causally. So if we think of kind of a basic example, both of my kids did this. I think it was always in second grade. It might be an American university or college, or sorry, not American school phenomenon. But they came home one day with a one-sheet diagram of the weather cycle. And what they had done was, they draw the sun. So you have the sun over here, and they know what the sun is, and the sun delivers rays. The rays go down, and there's a pond or a lake here, and that was drawn, and it was colored in blue, and that's water. And then you have the rays from the heated water. Evaporation is going up, and the word evaporation is there. And then toward the top of the page, there's the word condensation, right? Clouds are formed. There's pictures of clouds. And then there's the word cooling up there because the heated water cools. Sometimes there's a little arrow indicating wind that might bang the clouds together. And then you see some downcoming thing calling rain or precipitation. So we have sun and wind and heat and cooling and evaporation and condensation, and it's all put together in an integrated understanding of how that part of reality works. So we have a little theory that goes on. And then that, of course, goes on open-endedly as we learn increasingly complicated theories and all of the debates about them and so forth. Now, we have then an amazingly sophisticated capacity that we're starting with, the human mind, and this is a bunch of subcapacities that hopefully all of them will work together in increasingly sophisticated form, but we start to study them in more disciplined fashion, and we have studies about how these things work. So we will say, for example, that what we want, let me change color a little bit here, is at this point to work on our observation skills. I'm going to change out this one. I think it's dying. And one of our goals is to consciously pay attention to each of our capacities, sensory and perceptual capacities, and learn how to use it in a very sophisticated way, to work on my observation skills. So if I'm paying attention to music, for example, I become a much better and more sophisticated listener. If I'm older and I get into wine, I have friends who are this way, they can make very fine discriminations about what's going on in the wine, and have developed a very sophisticated vocabulary to describe all of that. And most of that is just opaque to me. It's just kind of red wine, white wine. That's the level of my observation skills in that area, right? and so forth. Here, we start talking about the importance of definition. Because when we are conceptualizing the world, we're putting it in a structure. Right? It belongs to this category, but it's differentiated from the other things in that category. And we want to make sure it's in the right category, and we've identified the proper distinguishing features and what distinguishes also this category from that category. So we have a very sophisticated tree. So we might say, there's dogs, but then we start to learn there's different kinds of dogs. There are golden retrievers, and there's dachshunds, right, and so forth. So all of those are defined as dogs, but they're differentiated from each other. But then dogs and cats and cows and horses go into a broader category, mammals. and then so forth. And so by the time we're actually pretty young at this point, we've got this very sophisticated taxonomy of just the animal kingdom, so to speak. And we can place any new animal that comes along in that because we have worked out the definitions. Here, this is why, your middle school teacher was so mean to you, right? Focusing on all of the rules of grammar. How do you take sentences apart and see that they have nouns and verbs and adjectives and adverbs and then various combination phrases of those, and how to put them together in a way that actually captures something fairly sophisticated in the world, and is in want these rules to be common so that we can communicate with each other. So we learn, if we say, Bob hit Tom, that means something different from Tom hit Bob. And so in English grammar anyway, word order matters, and there are rules about word order. And you have to get it right if you're going to capture the actual facts on the ground. Other languages will do it in different ways. Here we focus on rhetoric, how to put combinations of sentences together in ways that are effective at communicating various messages. When we're getting to talking about theories, we do logic. And the more that we learn about all of these things, and the more sophisticated we are, the more we're able to use our minds in sophisticated and accurate fashion. So part of the goal of education and why we spend so many years from an infant to adulthood is mastering all of these and being able to do them at a sufficiently sophisticated level to function in the world as a human being takes a long time. It's really complicated, takes a lot of work, and so we invest hugely in the education process. And the goal is exactly parallel, of course, to our bodies. Our bodies also take a long time to develop. But at some level, we want to, as adults, have a fully healthy, functioning body, and I know all of the capacities of my body. I know how to use it well for all kinds of circumstances, and I'm committed to being able to use my body well in all of these ways. The same thing happens on the mind side. Of course, they also have to be integrated. So this is the human cognitive. That's pretty amazing. So what I want to do next is take this and put it in a box and now integrate a specific concept in all of this of knowledge and what we mean when we talk about something being knowledge. So think about some things that you know. I'll ask you a question. Is the sun shining today? So that's one thing that you know. There's a what? Well, the sun is shining. I know that. If I asked a closely related question, well, how do you know that? Well, for me, I would say, I observe it, or I will use my senses. Let me now ask you, what is 9 times 8? Okay, do you know that? And you'll say, yes, I know that. So, what did I say? 9 times 8? And you'll say something like, well, I just did a quick calculation in my head. I did a little act of mathematical reasoning. And maybe if I asked you, well, what's 12 times 13? Then you would have to engage in a longer process of reasoning because maybe you don't have that one quite as memorized. Or, yeah, there you go. So then you say, now I know this, but how is that I use a certain process of mathematical reasoning? But think of other kinds of claims of knowledge that people will make. So suppose, I'll use this example. So you have a pain in your side, really sharp, sudden pain in your side. Doesn't go away, so you're kind of smart, and you go to the doctor. The doctor examines you, and the doctor says, you have appendicitis. And you go, wow, okay. How do you know that, doc? And then suppose she goes on to say, if we don't do anything, you will die, 100%. How do you know that? And then suppose she also says, well, we can do surgery on you, and we should probably schedule this pretty quickly. And I know that we can cut you open, lay you down, anesthetize you, cut your body open, remove the goopy stuff from your body, sew you back up again, and you have a 99.87% chance of surviving. Quite safe, don't worry. Right? Of course you're worried, but do you do it? And most people will say yes. Now, the stakes might be high, so I will get a second opinion. Another doctor says basically the same thing. So, another knowledge claim, appendectomy. And if we're to ask, well, how does the doctor know this? Then we start to tell a more sophisticated story, complicated story. Right, there was lots of experience, lots of prior scientific researching and experiment that had gone on, et cetera, et cetera. And at some point we are trusting that process to say, all right, she knows what she's talking about. And for most people, I will put my life in this person's hands based on my assessment of the person's knowledge claim. All right, now let me give you another kind of claim. I'm picking on my kids a little bit, but 16-year-old daughter comes home one weekend after a party at the school, and she says, I met a boy last week, and I know he's the one. He's perfect. We're going to get married, and okay. I'm not making this up. I know he's the one. And this is a 16-year-old girl. Carrie Ann.
I'm laughing. It sounds like something a 16-year-old would say.
Yes. Okay. Now, I didn't say very much, right? But I could get all philosophical at this point and say, well, how did you know? Right? And do you really know? And right? Well, okay, that's going to be one of the issues, right? Because this is just to say, this is a knowledge claim, right, that someone makes. And many people will make knowledge claims of this sort. And they are serious. She's not messing around. She really thinks she knows this. Okay, let me give you another example. We'll increase the level of, you go to a fortune teller. I suppose this is a real fortune teller. You're actually traveling through Romania, right? The home of the traveler gypsy people. Right? And you go to a festival at which there are fortune tellers, and they've been doing this for some hundreds or thousands of years, and you pay your fee, and she says to you, right, you will die. And you say, well, I already knew that. Right? But you will die 53 years from now on a boat at 10:15 in the evening. So, fortune teller, predicting your death. Do you now know? Well, I'll just leave that as a serious but rhetorical question. Okay, upping the stakes a little bit. Suppose you are talking to someone who is religious, takes the religion seriously, and majority religion in the United States is Christian religion. So you're talking to a Christian and discussing about the beliefs and say, what are the core beliefs of Christianity? And one of the core beliefs, of course, is the divinity of Jesus, that he was born of a virgin, that Mary, when she gave birth to him, had not had carnal relations with any man. So Jesus is a result of pregnancy made by God of Mary, who was a virgin. So the Christian then will claim, in all seriousness, the birth of Jesus was to a virgin. And if you push back and you say, well, that's just your belief, you don't really know that, they'll say, no, I know this 100%. Okay, now I left this side open. How do I know that the sun is shining? Well, I use my senses. How do I know the math thing? I did some reasoning. How do I know that the doctor knows, or how does she claim her knowledge? She's basing it on lots of experience and experimenting and so forth. The 16-year-old girl, that's what she claims to know. But if I ask, how do you know that? What would she say? And I'm pretty sure what she would say is, I have some very strong feelings. I just know how I feel, and based on those powerful feelings, I am projecting something or other. Okay. What is the word we use when a fortune teller? So, I don't know, I'll act my fortune teller, right? So I've got my crystal ball, and I'll close my eyes and massage it a little bit. I'm not necessarily trying to get into an emotional state, and I'm closing my eyes. Right. What am I waiting for? Some sort of prophecy, right? I'm waiting for, there's some sort of spiritual dimension. I might be putting some words in her mouth, but that spiritual dimension has knowledge, including knowledge of the future. And if I get myself into the right state, it will communicate itself to me. And so we say this is a mystical claim, kind of mysticism. And that's the language we use. So you guys blocked? Can you see those words? Or if we think of various other kinds of mystics, what they will often do is to say that in order to acquire true knowledge, you need to retreat from the physical world. So they will go off into the desert, or they will go up into the mountains and into a cave, or they don't see anything, they close their eyes, they shut down their body, there's no sound, so their ears are not working. This is not a sensory experience that happens. I'm not thinking about things. I'm trying not to use any of my memories. My point is that if I put my cognitive apparatus, so to speak, shut it all down as much as possible, then a kind of supernatural thing will happen, right? God or the gods will communicate directly to me, and that counts as knowledge, and the best kind of knowledge, a mystical experience. And what's the most common word we'll use to describe many, or not necessarily all, but many or most of the core claims of major religions? I know these things will be the claim, but in this case, it wasn't, I was there when Mary gave birth, or I had followed her around, or I knew her well, and I knew that she hadn't been with a man. So it's not an experiential claim. I'm not usually claiming that I can give you a really good argument, right, that accounts for biology and perhaps exceptions to the biology and so forth. I'm not just going by my feelings, will be the claim. I'm not even necessarily claiming that I had a direct connection to God, and God said to me in particular, Mary was a virgin, now you know this. And said, what is the word that we use? Sorry? It's a kind of belief, but all of these are beliefs. Yeah, so it's a belief that is acquired by faith, a faith belief. And so in that case, the adjective counts. Now, faith, of course, is one of those words that is used in various ways. Sometimes we just mean faith is the content. My faith is this set of 10 beliefs. Right? But sometimes, and more often, faith means the method. I take a leap of faith, or I'm making a faith commitment of a certain sort to a certain set of beliefs. Carry on.
But so does the like revelation cover just mysticism, or both mysticism and when people say it was revealed?
Yes.
Revelation, they mean both of the last two, but which one?
I think
Both of the last two, or is it specifically mysticism?
I think it's both, but the more fundamental one is the mystical claim. And there's two audiences here, so to speak. So first, the mystic claim is God or the God speaks directly to a special individual. The mystic or the prophet, that person receives a revelation. Something is revealed to, usually it's him. Then the mystic now turns to his people and says, this is what God has revealed to me, or the gods have revealed to me, and you should believe this. And what that person is asking is for them to have faith in the prophet, right? Because those people did not themselves have the revelation. Claims, and what we have then is a bunch of ways of using your cognitive apparatus. And the claim for each of them is that some of them or all of them will reveal knowledge. Now, what I want to do next is introduce the concept of objective, because these are lots of claims, and people have all sorts of claims. And in many cases, the claims will contradict each other. And what's behind the contradiction is people will say, I use my cognitive apparatus this way, and I reach this conclusion. And someone will say, well, I use my cognitive apparatus this way, and I reach this conclusion, but they can't both be true because they contradict each other. And so then when we start to more sophisticatedly talk about, within ourselves and amongst each other, about who really knows things and how we're going to sort the things that we might want to be true from things that aren't really true, from things that are fantasies, from things that are reality, from things that are perhaps in the area, but we don't yet want to call them knowledge because we need to do more work and so forth. How do we sort out what objectively is in fact knowledge from everything else? And that's where we start to use this particular concept. Now let me start by, again, doing a little picture. Each of these is in themselves complicated and lots of work to be done, but suppose we have a little cartoon picture. Suppose we say, all right, here's reality. Here we are at the Springfield. This is a building with some windows, and we got some trees, right? And there's a little bird flying around out there. So this is reality. And we've got a person, you. And this is my exaggerated but terrible cartooning skill. This is, I'm going to exaggerate your head because we're talking about cognition, what goes on inside the head. So here's your head. And what we want to do is try to figure out, this is reality, and we want this person to come to know reality. So what's inside their head, so to speak, is accurate with respect to what's outside of the head. And then on the basis of their knowledge, hopefully, or their more or less accurate beliefs, they will then instruct their body to act in the world successfully. So this is my philosophy cartoon at this point. Now, when we use the words objective and subjective, we use them in a pair of closely related ways. One way we use this concept is to say, well, these are out here all of the objects in reality. And actually, maybe I'll just say maybe God or the gods are out here. There's natural reality. So we'll leave that as an open question, whether there's an additional reality. And in here or here, we have a subject. And what we mean by a subject is a being that has a subjective life, right, for whom there is experience and memory and reality and so on. So that is to use the concepts in, I'm just going to use a big philosophy word, an ontological way. What's reality made up? Reality is made up of a whole bunch of objects that are interacting with each other. And in that reality, there are also subjects that are coming to be aware of reality out there and interacting in reality in that sense. Now that is ontology dividing the world up this way. Now when we use the word objective, though, in the context that we are talking today, what we are talking about is what is going on inside the subject. Now, in some sense, it's all subjective in that the subject is engaging in various processes, but we use the word objective to describe a particular way of using one's apparatus inside your head, in contrast to some other ways of using your mind or your apparatus that are not objective, or whatever that is. So the two phrases I want to introduce here are the two other major competing theories, which are intrinsic and subjective, and I'll put quotation marks around them. So what we're saying is, you are a subject, and you have all of these apparatuses in your mind that you can use. How are you using them? Are you using your apparatus objectively or in some other way? Now, example, just to illustrate this. Think of grading. So you're all students. You know this one was. Well, I'm your professor. I've asked you to write a philosophy essay on the meaning of life, and you have to include Plato, Aristotle, Marcus Aurelius, and Friedrich Nietzsche. Those are the criteria for the essay. We've talked about all these guys. You've done your homework. You've done your research. You write your paper. You give me your paper. I am now at my desk. Actually, I do this from an easy chair, but I've got your paper in front of you. My job now is to read your paper and assign a grade. Now, what do you want me to do? You want me to assign you a grade that is, and I'm going to use the word now, an objective assessment of the worth of the paper. So if you get a B, that B means something. You get an A, you get an F, whatever it is. Now, what's going on in my mind, or what are the possibilities here? And the big thing that we worry about here is to say, the professor may or may not function objectively in grading your paper. What you hope I would do is I would actually read the paper. And I think you probably know this, but some professors don't do that. It's true. Or they will skim the paper, right? So they don't actually read it. And that then is going to be to say the person is not functioning objectively, because this is the object that I'm supposed to be assessing, and it has a bunch of words that are in a structure. There's a narrative there, perhaps, or a theory that is presented, and a number of them, and so on. So the only way I can come to evaluate objectively is by actually reading it, knowing what all of the words mean, and sometimes I have to stop and think about that and try different interpretations, put it all together, and then make the assignment. So I have to read it, and I have to evaluate it according to the criteria. Oh, you didn't actually talk about Aristotle at all, but that was one of the criteria, right? Or you got things wrong entirely about Nietzsche, right? Or this section on Plato, you didn't actually write that. You copy and pasted that from the internet. So this is not your work. So I am objectively paying attention to all of those things that are in your essay, and I'm supposed to evaluate all of those. Now, to the extent that I read it, I understand it, I apply the announced criteria to it, and I assign you a grade, then we would say that's objective grading. I'm doing my job correctly. Now, what's your name, by the way? Helen? Okay. Suppose Helen is in my class, and Helen has submitted her essay, and I look at this and I say, oh, Helen, in a kind of disgusted tone of voice. Right? And I go to the back and I write, what should I write? D. You guys use the D grade? It's like just one level up. But I don't want to seem too vindictive, so I'll write D+. Right? And I'm done in 8 seconds. What has just happened? Well, I have not actually paid attention to the object of the essay, the ideas that are expressed, the arguments that are expressed. Instead, what I'm doing is just saying, oh, this is Helen, and I don't know, maybe I'm going to go back 100 years. Suppose I'm an old-fashioned sexist professor, right? And you're the first woman to show up in my philosophy class, and I think, oh, women in philosophy, no, they should not be here. So what I then have is my personal subjective belief that has nothing to do with Helen's objective capacities or what Helen has objectively produced. And my evaluation then is based on my subjective evaluation. I don't like women, I don't like Helen, I don't like, right, whatever it is about that. So the subjective people, and there's lots of forms of subjectivism then, is to say, I'm going to form my beliefs and what I think I know, but it's not going to be based on facts about the world. Instead, it's going to be based on things that are going on inside me that I want to, right, believe. Now that is this contrast between the objective and the subjective. What about the intrinsic? Suppose I were to try to be somewhat mystical. Maybe what I would do is, here's Helen's paper, and I kind of close my eyes and I just put my hand on Helen's paper, right? And I believe that in some sense, the value of her paper is embedded in the essay, and I should just be able to, it will speak to me in some way. If it's a B plus paper, the B plusness that's embedded in the essay will communicate to me. I don't need to do any additional work. It will speak to me in some way. So that then is to say, the intrinsic theory says whatever is out here just speaks to you more or less automatically. It communicates to your mind. You don't need to engage in any effort. The subjective position, right, is saying everything happens inside you, and you make the decision without reference to external facts. The objective position is saying, obviously, you have to do something as a subject, but what you are trying to do is keep your subject, you, in connection with the actual facts of the case that are out there objectively. And this is one way of characterizing the big debate. So the question is, how do I use this? And the answer that objectivists, this is now just small o objectivists, is to say that you are a subject and you have a mind with a certain set of capacities, that to be objective then is to use all of your mind's capacities in a way that keeps you connected to the objective facts. And what you are looking for is all of the ways in which you can become disconnected from the facts, and that's going to mess up your thinking, lead you to believe things that are not actually knowledge, and that's going to mess you up. So to the extent that you observe well, you observe enough, you observe accurately, you will form knowledge of reality. To the extent that you define your concepts clearly and objectively, and you're open to corrections when it turns out you've made mistakes and you're using words in the wrong way, you will increasingly be able to use words objectively. To the extent that you know and master grammar, you will be able to form increasingly sophisticated thoughts and capture increasingly complicated things about reality and communicate them. And then the same thing goes on here with narratives and theories. The better you work all of those things that go into scientific method and social scientific method, and there's huge literatures there, but to the extent that you use all of those tools well, you'll have the best. And to the extent that you don't, that's when you are entering the terrain of subjectivity, usually, and or error. Now, the next issue is there is in philosophy and more broadly in cultural life the idea and widespread belief that objectivity is impossible, right? That objectivity is a myth and that we should basically just set it aside, that in various ways either intrinsicism or subjectivity are the only ways to go. That's an abstract formulation, but when we, for example, are arguing about with other people important things like politics, how often do you hear the idea that politics is a realm of subjectivity? It's just competing battles and competing wills. Or in journalism, many journalists, former journalists as we might want to call them, will say, objectivity is a myth. When I'm functioning as a journalist, I am in advocacy. I am in a persuasion mode, but free with respect to any sort of objective factual orientation. So why might we think, this is going to be the question then, that objectivity is a myth? I'm asking you students, because you guys are in the midst of all of this, and perhaps even having these debates yourselves, what are the challenges here? Oh yeah, go ahead, Bodhi.
One of the big ones there is going to be that you're in a certain placement in society, or you're operating kind of blind to certain facts.
Okay, good. All right, so say the first one again.
Your place in society.
Okay, all right, so place in society, right? And or your upbringing. Okay, that was the second one, right? Okay. Those might be related to you, or your upbringing is related to your place in society. So in many cases, this is sometimes what we call an ad hominem argument, right? Someone will present some facts or claims of facts, but the other person will then just dismiss those claims, saying, you're from the wrong class. What do you know? So if we unpack this, well, what's going on then? Are we saying that people in this part of society, they are incapable of being objective? But people from this part of society or that part of society are capable of being objective? What do you think, Bodhi? This is yours.
Well, I guess it depends on how extreme they're going with it, but they might argue that people who are of a certain class are going to be closer to the facts because they can experience them more readily.
Okay.
Say that it's all just stuck to the viewpoint and that no one can be objective, they can only reflect the facts of a class.
Okay, so one way of doing it, okay, so you have a lesser and a stronger claim. So we might then say, let's take a kind of a soft quasi-Marxist analysis. We might then say, I'm from the working class. I work with my hands. I'm in the factories. I'm in the field. So I know stuff, right, based on experience. You guys who are working in offices, you are distant from the facts on the ground. You have too many levels of analysis, right? Okay, so class might then mean, right, your distance from the facts. I need to put the word from. Of course, that one can also be flipped around, and it would be the same argument in reverse. People in the office might then say, well, you people on the factory floor, you're not reading the news from London, from Karachi, from Sydney, Australia, about big picture macroeconomic and political circumstances that are affecting our operations at this company. I am aware of those facts and you're not. So therefore, I'm the objective one and you are doing something else. Okay, so that's right to the first one. Now the other one then might be a kind of conditioning claim. This may be tying it into this here. We might then say, again, we'll use kind of soft Marxism as an example here. if you are born into a poor family versus being born into a rich family. If you're born into a poor family, then what are you taught? Well, you're taught that, and on the Marxist version, the rich are out to get you, the rich are oppressing you, you will never get a chance, they're holding you down, they own all of the senators and the judges since they just passed legislation to benefit them. So as a young person, then you are growing up to hate the rich people. And we might then say, well, 6 and 8 and 10-year-old kids being what they are, they're not going to be able to challenge their position, so they're just conditioned. And it might be the same thing going the other way, right? The rich people, they get to go to the right schools, they meet the right people, they run into some poor people who are sweaty from the end of the day, and they don't smell so good, right? And they haven't been able to afford good dental work for their kids, right? So their teeth are a little bit crooked and they're not wearing the right clothes. So it might be then that the rich class people are conditioned to believe that they are really better and that those people really are beneath them in some way. Okay, so that's a kind of set of claims. So nobody can be objective on this stronger claim, or we might just say it's really hard, perhaps shading into impossible for other people to be objective because they're just too far from the facts. Okay, so one set of challenges to objectivity. What else? Why else might objectivity be hard or impossible? Okay, I want to come back to my 16-year-old. I suppose, and I didn't do this, but suppose with my 16-year-old, she comes in and says, yeah, I just know he's the one, he's perfect, we're going to get married, etc., and live happily ever after. Suppose I tried to be objective with her. I say, sit down, dear. Let me explain to you about 16-year-old boys. Right? I've been there, I know what they're like. Some of my best friends used to be 16-year-old boys, etc., etc. And I'm drawing on my experience, and this is all objective experience. Suppose I pull up on Google and I say divorce rates, and I say, look at this screen. 49% of all marriages end in divorce. The 51% that don't end in divorce, 4% of them are genuinely happy. The others are staying together for the kids and because it's too expensive to get divorced. They have to lose half their stuff and they don't want to do that. So I'm being super objective here. Experience, facts, data. And it has zero effect on the 16-year-old girl. Why is that? Why is it not possible or very difficult for her to be objective? Now, it's probably not one of these ones, because rich 16-year-old girls, middle-class 16-year-old girls, and poor 16-year-old girls, they all act the same. And the parents of them also, if they try to be objective, will appeal to the same facts and the same experience. So what is the challenge in this case? Okay, emotions. Okay, so emotions. So all over here, I've been talking perhaps in too intellectual a way. Right? But maybe the story would be to say, well, yeah, okay, we have a rational capacity, and maybe if we work at it, we can aspire to some level of objectivity, but we're also emotional beings. And the emotions are all over the map, they're very strong, and now I'm going to put this as a fact claim, which might be a little bit paradoxical. The fact is that we're much more emotional than we are rational. So objectivity,
Is there any point where we address like gut instinct? You know how you sense and you can't put it into words.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So I'm going to put that right over here. We have this phrase, right, gut instinct. So I'll give you a related example. my wife is from Argentina, and it's interesting, she would relate a conversation that she had with some of her girlfriends, and we had exactly this conversation about gut instinct. So these were all now middle-aged women, so they had a certain amount of experience, and one of them had gone on a date with a guy, and apparently he was, like, at first glance, God's gift to women, right? You know, very handsome, very successful, right? Lots of money, right, and so on. But the woman had said, I'd gone on this date and something wasn't right. And she didn't go out on a date with him for a second time. Right? And I felt it somewhere in here. It was a kind of instinct. Okay. Now, would that count as an example? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
Well, is that not objective? Just late.
yes. Okay, so good. So, but my first question though is, would that count as an example where it's okay to use gut instinct? Okay, so we can use that as a working example. So then we try to analyze that. So what's going on there? Is she being objective in saying, no, I'm not going to go on a date with this guy? Even if some of the other objective facts are, well, he looks this way, he drives this kind of car, he has this kind of job, et cetera, et cetera. So I can list all kinds of objective facts, but there is another fact, that is to say, in my subject, there are certain feelings that are going on, right? Or we might use another metaphor, some sort of red flag is going off inside me emotionally, and I'm not going to ignore that. So how do we account then for that? Because it's just what we want to say it is. And then you started to give an explanation for say, well, sometimes our knowledge status is that we are aware of certain things. Right? I'm observing. So when we're on dates and we're looking at each other very carefully and listening to various sounds, right? So something sounds a little off, or a facial expression for a moment, just for a moment, was just a little off. And you register these things and they get filed away in your memory, but then as you say it, they stay implicit. It's very hard for us to make them explicit. Okay, so we have at this point experience and quasi-conceptual knowledge. How should we handle that? Carrie Ann.
Well, I've had lots of conversations with people about this too. 'Cause
Okay.
I don't like the phrase because what some people may just stop with, I just had this bad feeling, or the red flag hit me, and they don't want to analyze it. So to determine whether it's really based on, the claim is based objectively or subjectively, you have to examine, like really introspect. Think about what was going on. Did you notice something? And is that really something you're concerned about? I noticed that the nice clothes were fake designer. It was from Walmart and not really Armani or whatever that I don't know really.
Right. Or it actually said Armani, but you knew it was a knockoff. So the guy's right. Okay.
It was a signal that he's trying to pose as somebody successful. Or maybe all he did was talk about himself, and you couldn't articulate it at first, but we really rake your memory and introspect. Like what were things that actually could be legitimate? Like, I realized I felt invisible because he didn't ask me about myself at all, and we talked about himself. And based on experience, you might know that concerning quality of the person that you don't want to be in a relationship with underworld that. Or maybe you just said he's wearing a red shirt and you don't like red. Maybe that's not a good reason to say it's so it depends.
Right.
When you really pinpoint it to what were you observing and whether that ground is a legitimate grounds of concern or not.
Yeah.
So it just takes a lot of work to get.
Okay, so in that case, what we would say is, this is all coming out of the emotion discussion, is that you are really feeling certain emotions. You're feeling uneasiness or disquiet, or something's making you nervous. And so an objective response would say, yes, I really am feeling those things. So that is objective. And then to try to figure out where is that emotion coming from. Now we might have a view that says, well, emotions are just weird and irrational and they come from nowhere. But if we're going to be objective about emotions, then it might be to start doing something like what Carrie Ann does. If I just say, well, I had some weird emotions, so I'm not going to date him anymore, that would be more subjective, even if, accidentally you were right. But if you go through a more analytical process, and you might then say, when we are dating people, this is a huge thing, or I'm talking about forming a relationship with someone, and there are dozens of important things that go into that, hundreds of semi-important things that go into that. That's a huge amount of information for me to think about before I'm making any sort of a relation. And if then I've gone on one date with this person, what you know is over the course of one date already, you're going to have hundreds and thousands of impressions of that person. You have to give yourself some time to process all of those things and to think about those things. And so that then would just be to say, yeah, I don't quite know what the meaning of this is, but I'm objectively going to approach it, and so we would work it into it. And if I can identify the observations and make a rational estimation about what it means, say, about the person, and I'm confident about that, then the objective thing would be to say, I'm not going to go on a date with this person anymore. Okay, so that's emotions. But let's try some other emotions. So the 16-year-old girl is in the grip of some wonderful emotions, right, to go through, but maybe she needs to increase her thinking process, give it more time before she reaches a big judgment like that. The date process. Let's try one with guys. This is why women live longer than men do. So guys will very frequently have some sort of pain or ache in their body, and their wife or girlfriend will say, you should go to see the doctor. And what does the guy say? That's right, not going to do it. Right? So the woman has the identical pain, doesn't go away after a day or two. She goes to the doctor. Okay. And this is cross-cultural. Right. Okay. Now you might say, okay, what's the objective policy is something wrong. We all know this. Something's wrong with you. You go to the doctor. So this is a sex or gender specific thing. So what's going on in that case? This is a kind of emotion. How would we analyze it? Almost every guy, when he does that, though, he stands up a little straighter. Nah. Chest goes out. All right, so what am I doing? I am a man. And what's built into I am a man? Not only am I a man, I am a manly man. Okay, so it could be testosterone. Okay, yeah, go with the macho. Yeah. I have a self-image of who I am. I'm a man. And what is it to be a man? Strong, tough, James Bond, invincible, especially when you're younger, and so forth. And if I have to admit there's something wrong with me, then what am I admitting? I'm weak. And that admission that I'm weak, or have a weakness, or something wrong with me, conflicts with my preferred self-image. And it makes me feel less of a man. But I'm not going to feel less of a man. So is this an emotional thing that is interfering with the objective process? Okay, so we have the red flag. Right? We have the infatuation. We have the manly man. All right, I'll do a two confessions. When I was in graduate school, I went on a long road trip with a friend. I'm from Ontario. I'd never been to Colorado. My friend from graduate school was from Colorado. And so I had an old car that really should not have taken out on the highway, but we're going to go all the way to Colorado in this car. So we're out in this was Nebraska. I don't know if you've ever driven across Nebraska, but it just doesn't stop. It's terrible. There's just like nothing, right, forever. And so this old car, and also we were, not very much money, poor graduate students just getting by. And then the car starts making a sound from the engine. Okay. And then it gets a little bit louder after another couple hundred miles. So what do? Turn the radio up. Okay. Now, I'm exaggerating only a little bit because it was more, we did turn the radio up, but we did resolve we were going to stop at the next town. We just didn't want to listen to the thing. But what your first thought was, why am I turning the radio up?
So you care less about the noise?
I'm sorry?
You care less about the noise?
Yes, you care less about the noise because you can't hear it. Yes. So it's like, I don't want to hear that sound. So I'm going to just make it go away. And obviously, people often will do this. There's a certain fact they don't want to pay attention to, and they'll find ways to shove that fact aside. Now, why don't I want to pay attention to this fact?
Because you call it until you solve the problem.
Yeah, okay. I shouldn't have told you that part, that we actually planned to solve the problem, right? Yeah, so the first thing just would be, it's like, oh my, something's wrong with the car, right? And that's stressful. And that's just uncomfortable. And we're in the middle of Nebraska, right? Which is like doubly stressful. Right? It's not like there's something wrong with my car and I'm in my hometown. And it might cost $1,000 to get it fixed. I'm a poor graduate student. So all of this is going on in the background. I don't want to pay attention to this fact. And so my emotion, the argument then, is overriding what we would say is the objective policy. I should pay attention to this and resolve to deal with it. Okay, so in that case, I know in my case, it was actually just the dominant emotion was fear, right? How am I going to pay the rent next month if I have to spend all of my money on getting this car fixed? Okay, so we have now a series of examples of emotions. And the question is it the case that the fact that we are emotional beings, does that fact rather mean that we cannot be objective? Let me give you another example to think about. Just because I'm starting to feel a little time pressure here. Often when we're talking about objectivity, it comes up in certain contexts. We'll say, for example, journalism is just unobjective. So especially in the new social media era, right? You all know this very common complaint, right? So you try to read the news online, and what do you get? Everything is just slanted. A lot of stuff is just made up. It's propaganda. It's ideological, right? Or it might be that we think the corporation that owns it is pulling the purse strings and pushing a particular agenda, or behind the scenes there's a political agenda or religious agenda. And so it's tempting then to say it's all garbage at some level. It's just people subjectively making up whatever arguments they think are going to pay. So the journalism, in effect, is dead, or at least the myth of objective journalism is dead. So that kind of argument. Okay. Now, is that true? So let me give you an example. So I almost wanted to do this, but we're a little bit remote. So as you get an old-fashioned newspaper, the kind that's been around for hundreds of years, and they still actually print them. So you buy a newspaper, you buy the Chicago Tribune, and you look at it. So this is journalism. And it's organized into a fairly standard division of sections. You have the front page and the front section, and then usually the next section is sports. There's a whole section devoted to sports. Then there's a whole section devoted to business. And then there's a whole section that's typically devoted to entertainment, lifestyle, right, and so forth. So suppose we were then this is where a PowerPoint would be nice. We take the newspaper, so this is journalism, and have the four sections out in front of us. front section, there's all the political news and the political editorializing. And what did I say next? Sports, business, entertainment, and lifestyle. Okay. So as we were to go to the sports section, what's most likely this time of year to be the headline for the sports section? Chicago Cubs lost. Chicago White Sox won. And then you start to read, it says these two teams played. One was traveling, one was at home. Here's the score. These guys got the runs. The coach said this after the game. Okay. Is that objective or subjective? Well, objective. Then you open the page, and here are all of the other baseball games that were played yesterday. And here are the scores. And here's the schedule for next week. This is the pennant standings. This is what happened in soccer, football, all of the other sports right around the world. And it's all basically 100% objective. Go to the business section. Boeing CEO testifies before Congress committee. Apple stock increases 1%. Hey. IBM in discussion mergers with Dell Corporation. I just made that up. But you read all of that. Is that objective or subjective? Objective, right? Then you open the page, here are all of the stock prices, here are all the bond prices, here are all of the various funds. Lots of charts about performance over the last 6 years, 5 months, right, or whatever. It's all objective. Now we go to the front section. I don't want to pick on the Chicago Tribune, but you pick whatever newspaper you want. And there's the political news. And you go to usually it's the back inside 2 pages, all the political editorials. And that's where we start getting disgusted. Oh, this is so slanted. This is all subjective. So what's the point I'm trying to get to here? This is all journalism. But we don't seem to have a problem in sports journalism with being objective, or in business journalism with being objective, but we do in political journalism have a problem with being objective. So maybe it's not, in general, our place in society. Maybe it's not the fact that we are emotional specific beings. Maybe it is, right, domain-specific issues. People find it easy, or we might say, to be objective about sports and business, but not about politics. I'll put a question mark there. So some areas of life were fine, other areas of life, challenges. So what do you think about that? Suppose in the lifestyle section, there was a subsection, right, about religion. Put a question mark there. So I might go to the lifestyle dinner. Here's an interview with a movie star. Here's a listing of the movies that are coming out this weekend. Here are the plays that are playing. These bands are performing. All of that's perfectly objective. And then there's this one movie that is on this religious theme, and here's a review of that movie. And we might say, oh man, that's so subjectivist and slanted, et cetera, et cetera. So in the context of overall, we can be objective about entertainment industry, but it's that domain that is going to bring out. And some people will say, that's the greatest movie ever. Other people will say, that's the worst movie ever, but only if it's about certain topics. So is it the case that it's difficult to impossible to be objective about some things? And that's where the real challenges are. Carrie Ann, you need to say something. Yes, I know you're trying to be patient, but Yeah, prompt. Go ahead.
It can be more challenging for a variety of reasons. I don't think it's impossible to be objective. It's just that I think what's lurking in the back of this bifurcation, the way a lot of people articulate it, is, well, there's facts and there's values.
Uh-huh.
And so they think for each category.
Yeah, so we might not do it this way, but we might have another. There are some things that are factual and other things that are about values, right? Or some things are descriptive, some things are normative. And we can be objective in the factual, descriptive realm, but not in the value and normative realm. And cross-categorially, then we might say, well, there are facts involved in these cases here, but it's the normative elements that are predominant. Okay. All right. I don't know. Let's push back a little bit on that one. No, I think that's right. Think about sports. Is sports factual or is it normative? Yeah, Richard was asking me about hockey scores. That's right. Yeah. And so my brother and my dad, to a lesser degree, they are fanatics. So, yeah, my brother I joke with him, he has a little shrine, a religious shrine, devoted to the Toronto Maple Leafs, jerseys and pennants and pictures and this, that, and the other thing. So we said, well, no, politics really matters to people, so they get all worked up about it. Religion really matters to people, and they get all worked up about it. But isn't that true about sports, too? So it's just as normative. Is that also true about business? Have to hire people, fire people? It's pretty normative. Right? You just, put $10 million of your hard-earned money on a particular stock, and the stock market's going to open. Right? There's going to be an announcement. Right? It's pretty normative. Okay, it really matters. Okay, so a puzzle here. Is it, though, then we might say, well, yeah, sports is incredibly normative, but maybe we have institutional devices to keep the subjectivity under control. Whereas in politics, maybe in religion, we don't have institutional devices to keep politicians and religious leaders under control so they can get away with a lot more.
Or the rules that guide business, sports, umpires that.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So when we have a sports game, we know what the rules are. We have a referee. The referee's supposed to be impartial. We have thousands of people who are watching the sporting match. So who won and who lost?
And tremendous focus on if there's a corrupt ump.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah. In business, we have all kinds of metrics measuring everything, and at least in public corporations, the results are announced every quarter. So any sort of bad stuff that's happening comes out very quickly. Maybe there's a lot less accountability on those things in the other domains, right, and so forth. So question then is, do these things make it impossible or just more difficult for people to be objective? And maybe the argument is that the reason why we need to talk so much about objectivity is because we recognize that as human beings, life is very complicated, that we are very passionate beings, that sometimes we do get lazy, sometimes we want certain things to be true. So it's in those cases where we need to have made explicit what our standards of objectivity are and what we are going to do to deal with all of those problem cases. Then it comes down to a matter of, am I going to do that or not? It becomes a personal choice commitment. And the problem just is some people don't do it. They don't want to do it. Other people will do it, and they will do the work and remain going in the objective direction. Now, this whole conversation about objectivity, the reason why we're talking about it this week is because, obviously Ayn Rand is central focus this week, and this is the concept she chose to identify in naming her philosophy. There was a quote, I think it was from Carrie Ann yesterday, when she said, yeah, we're talking about politics and so forth, but I'm not primarily an advocate of certain political views. Oh, is that Richard? Okay. All right. Sorry if I have a conceptual clarification thing to do here. Right, I'm not primarily an advocate of those. I'm primarily an advocate of, or underlying that advocate of egoism. And even that is more fundamentally, I'm an advocate of reason. And what the functioning of reason takes is a commitment to objectivity. We can work out, and we're still working out, human psychology and human cognition is very complicated. And we're learning more and more about these things all along. But then at the same time, the more fundamental value commitment is that each of us has control over how we use our own mind. Am I going to commit to doing these things to the best that I can, fully recognizing all of these challenges, right, that are coming? I might be coming from a biased background, and there's a lot of things that I need to unlearn. I'm going to be in the grip of very strong emotions, and learning how to handle my emotions, use them rather than being used by them along the way. Recognizing that some things really matter to me and that I'm dealing with in some domains, people or domains where people are not uniformly committed to objectivity, and there are not institutional checks in place to guide people in a more objective direction, that I need to redouble and have myself more sophisticated techniques available to me in order to make the objectivity happen. And then, yeah, just to end, right, this is, of course, one that we're all, right, in an educational role, those of us who are professors, of course, we all have our own views on all sorts of things. And one of the professional requirements then for educators is to learn. We might be arguing about politics or religion. Actually, that's what philosophy classes should be doing. That's why we are here. But I, as a professor, have extra responsibilities with respect to objectivity. I can't be an undoctrinator. I shouldn't be just trying to condition you to have a certain place in society. I have to recognize that you also will have lots of emotions and prior commitments and so on. So more sophisticated social objective methods have to be in place for education to happen.